Yeah.
Okay. Members of the City Council, please attend the call meeting of the City Council to be held in the 6th floor conference room, 801 Crawford Street, 6 p.m., Monday, June 22nd, 2015, for the purpose of a public work session. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed meeting by order of the mayor. Mr. Cherry? Here. Dr. Edmonds? Here. Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Dr. Whitaker?
Present.
Mayor Wright?
Yes, here.
Okay, Brandon?
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam
Good evening.
Vice Mayor, members of Council. Before we start on our agenda tonight, I have asked our incoming interim police chief to come tonight so I can introduce him personally to you.
How about that?
As well as Chief Hargis, who would stand up. This is Interim Chief Dennis Mook. Many of you know Dennis from his long career with the City of Portsmouth. He most recently has finished up a career in consulting and NCIS. Before that, he was the chief of the Department of the Newport News Police Department from 1997 to 2004. And before that, he was our police chief here in Portsmouth from 94 to 97. And that capped off a 23-year career, which started as a patrol officer with
rookie patrolman
with the City of Portsmouth Police Department. So, Dennis has a master's degree from George Washington. He has a BA from Baldwin Wallace University. He's a graduate of the FBI Academy, the Richmond Pell School, the FBI Law Enforcement Leadership Program, and a whole list of leadership certificates. So, he's qualified certainly on his experience and his education, but I think the important thing that really helped me make the decision to bring him in on an interim basis is his familiarity with the department, his understanding of the issues that we face in the short term, and I think his ability to take this department with that understanding and familiarity and continuing the policies and practices that Chief Hargis instituted while we do a search for a new police chief. So I just wanted to briefly introduce you to him in person, and if you'd like him to say something, I'm sure.
Absolutely. How you doing, Chief? Please.
Thank you very much, Brandon, for that warm welcome. Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, members of council, it really is my pleasure to be here. I feel like I'm home again. I really do. I've spent the majority of my adult life serving the citizens of Portsmouth, and I feel as though that it's an honor and a privilege that everyone feels that they have the confidence in me to continue in that capacity. My wife was born and raised here. My kids were born and halfway raised here before we moved them across the river. My 91-year-old mother-in-law still lives here and is out dancing 3 nights a week with her younger friends in their 80s. So we are over here all the time. But it really is a privilege to be here. And just very briefly, with me, what you see is what you get. I have no hidden agendas, no ulterior motives. I say what I mean. I'll never lie to anyone. I do what I say I'm going to do, and if I can't, I come back and tell you why I can't do it. And so I'm pretty straightforward. Police work is a people business, inside and outside the department. I love being with people. I will be out in the neighborhoods as absolutely much as I can. Crime has incrementally gone down under Chief Hargis's tenure, and the department's in excellent condition, and we intend to keep that ship going that same direction. But to keep it going that way, I'm a huge partnership person. I started the NEAT program back in 1995 and started community policing in the city, and we can't do it alone as a police department. We have to engage the citizens, all facets of local government, partnership with every other department as well as the schools, the business community, especially those men and women that live in our neighborhoods, and improve the quality of life. And that's what we intend on doing, is keep improving things even above and beyond what Ed and the fine men and women of the department have done. So my privilege and honor to be here. Thank you for asking me, and thank you, sir. My pleasure.
Okay. Welcome aboard. Thank you, Chief. Now, Brandon, before you get started, you and the Chief just alerted me to a message that I need to put out now. Speaking of interim chief, and I like your comments. You did not want the job. You will fill in and do your part, and I appreciate that. But as you all know, that the City Council has been recruiting for a city manager, and we're now preparing for interviews. So pursuant to the Virginia Code Section 2.2, 3716B. During this open session of council, we would like to announce that closed meetings will be held at undisclosed location within 15 days hereafter for the purpose of interviewing candidates for the position of Portsmouth Chief Administrative Officer. So this is a notice that we must put out to make sure that the public is aware that these things will be occurring, and I will read this statement at the beginning of the council meeting tomorrow night so everyone is aware that we're at this process, and when we go into close, I understand we no longer have to do that. We can go into close just like we'll do today for some other things and discuss this matter as well, which we plan to do. So with that, welcome, and hopefully help's on the way, and we'll get that process going. But I'm glad you're here, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Brandon.
Yes, sir. The next item is a presentation by Sarah McCoy with the Port of Virginia, and we have handouts of her PowerPoint at your desk. I'm trying to get it queued up here for the screen. Take it away, Sarah.
Good evening. Thank you all for having me.
Good evening.
Last time I was here with a colleague, we were here in September and we were announcing the reopening of the Portsmouth Marine Terminal. Tonight I'd like to give you an update on that and a more comprehensive update on Port of Virginia as a whole. And we'll talk about some changes we've made as an organization. We're going to talk about cargo volumes, how that's affected our finances, some challenges we faced with congestion and velocity, as well as how this increase in cargo has affected our economy, our competitiveness as we are ranked against other East Coast ports, and then what we have going for the future. I like it to be a dialogue. I don't mind being interrupted as we go through, but based on whatever your procedure is, then we can ask questions, but I'm open to whatever.
All right, very good.
So first things first, when we talk about some changes we've made as an organization structurally, we had previously were the Virginia Port Authority as well as the Virginia International Terminal. So the Port Authority, as you know, is the state agency. Virginia International Terminals is the operating entity that actually does the day-to-day operations on our terminals. We also have the Hampton Roads Chassis Pool. That would be the third entity that's all under the umbrella of the Port of Virginia. Prior to our CEO, John Reinhardt, coming on board in about 15 months ago, there were two different chains of leadership, the VPA and the VIT. He has consolidated those chains of leadership, and we have one senior leadership team. This is referenced 6 different leaders from various divisions across our organization, both of VIT and VPA heads of those departments. And so we have one systematic, straightforward chain of command and reporting system, so our decision-making process we've captured some efficiencies in that. And as is standard, we still report to our Board of Commissioners. These are appointed by the governor. Most recently, Mr. Blair Wimbush was just appointed. He's a former Norfolk Southern executive who is now retired but has joined our board, so bringing some rail experience to the board. So those are about the only updates with our organization, but volume. Volume is something that many of you have read about, listened to on the radio. It's also been featured on TV. But what we can say is that it has increased. So we are looking at an 8.4% increase in fiscal year 15 numbers when compared to the same period in fiscal year 2014. We've seen increases across the board. We've gone up 4% in rail, 13% in barge, 11% in truck, and our ship calls have gone up by 5% over the same period in fiscal year 14. So
Sarah, when you compare that 8.4% increase, how is that relative to the other ports? Because the other ports on the East Coast also experienced an increase. So did we get a higher increase than them, or do you even know?
Well, our numbers haven't come out because the fiscal year is not quite over. We usually do that analysis at the end of July. Our fiscal year, sorry, I'm talking about it without telling you, it's from July 1 to June 30th.
Okay.
So I will come back with that number, but when we measured this from fiscal year 13 in comparison to fiscal year 14, we were about the third fastest growing port on the East Coast. But I'll shoot you an email with that update
Very
at the
good.
end of
Thank you.
July once we've done that analysis. So what you're looking at here is just another way to conceptualize that volume growth. So this is the last 23 months. If a bar is in the teal color, that means that that month exceeded the volume growth for that same month the year prior. Please take note that in May we had our all-time high. This was the first time we have ever processed 230,000 TEUs, 20-foot equivalent units. It's just easy to think of it as a container. So 230,000 containers in 1 month. So that's a record for the Port of Virginia. So you can see we had some record months leading up to that, but that has been the highest so far. This obviously translates into revenue. So as you all know, we had some hard times during the recession, but this is showing you what our operating revenue has been as we've crawled out of that recessionary time period. And what you're looking at on the very end is fiscal year 2015, year to date. So you're looking at May, we had 421 million, my apologies, $500,000 in operating revenue, and that gray bar on the top of fiscal year 2015 is our forecasted closeout for the year. But what's more important is how that translates into net operating results. Yes, sir.
The 230, was that at both locations?
That's across the board at all of our 4 marine terminals and 2 inland facilities. So the 4 marine terminals here are Virginia International Gateway, Portsmouth Marine, Newport News Marine Terminal, and Norfolk International Terminals. We also have a terminal that we operate on the James River in Richmond, and then an inland facility in Front Royal, Virginia. So those
All 6 of those.
facilities.
All 6 of you.
But the bulk of that's still in Portsmouth, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. And so with our net operating results, you can see we have had a dramatic shift from fiscal year 2014, where we were in the red, 16 million, and we anticipate closing out the fiscal year 16 million in the black, which is good news. And all of that, just like you all went through the bond process, we got the stamp of approval and increased our bond ratings by each of the 3 rating systems, much like the city of Portsmouth. So we're all heading in the right track.
We were in New York at the same time.
That's right. It's a small world.
We
Yeah.
were in there talking about the port and the potential in our city, and they just finished talking to John and
Yeah.
his folks, and
Yeah.
so it's perfect timing.
It's a good collaboration
That's
right at that
right.
moment. Yeah. But with all of that volume comes some velocity challenges. With growth often comes congestion. What you're looking at in this photo is a photo of the truck gate at Virginia International Gateway. This photo was taken in March. Many of you know that we had some weather this year. In January and February, we were forced to close our operations down for about 4 days. This, in conjunction with the labor disruptions on the West Coast, caused a lot of cargo to be diverted to us in the month of March. In addition, the ship calls that weren't able to call on our facilities in January and February came in March. So we had a big surge of cargo at that time. And so you're looking at some photos from the month of March. And in order to address some of this congestion, we are making some investments. So you saw we are making net revenue, and we're plugging that back into the operation. Our Board of Commissioners, who you saw on one of those first slides, just approved in our board meeting last month for $135 million. About $446 million of this will go directly into equipment and the leasing of chassis and the hiring of operational staff. So more boots on the ground, more equipment on the ground, and we're tackling the problem through investment. Specifically, a significant amount of investment has taken place at Portsmouth Marine Terminal. When we were here in September, we said we had invested $7 million to bring PMT back up to speed, and we had at that time envisioned it to be a all-wheeled operation. So that means the box is coming off the ship, it's being placed directly on the chassis, and we thought, oh, well, yeah, it could have 100,000 containers operating through this facility, but we're not quite sure. In fact, we have used this facility. It has grown in volume dramatically since we opened it in September We now have 4 different vessel services calling this facility on a weekly basis. We've implemented and purchased and moved equipment to this facility, and we've also done some significant dredging at this facility. It just needed some operational maintenance dredging done there. So this facility used to look, here are some more things that are in progress. We are adding the free digital cameras to PMT. So our CEO and the bulk of our team watches those truck gates on a regular basis, but we didn't have a camera at PMT to watch those truck gates. But now you'll be able to log on online and see the truck gate at NIT, VIG, and PMT, so we can monitor the volume in real time no matter where you are across our facilities. We're also implementing new software at PMT so that we can better provide service to our partners. And then we're adding driver's assistance booths and inbound and outbound booths to improve safety for the motor carriers that are accessing that facility. And this is PMT just after we came in September and told you that it was open. So, you know, some action there. But this is PMT today. This was just taken last weekend. And so you can see the dramatic influx of volume right there. And so we're so grateful to have this facility. It's truly served as a pressure relief valve for us as we've been processing immense volumes.
Now, Sarah, have we got our arms around this big delay problem we're having with these truckers? Because we're still getting a lot of noise. Some of them even call us instead of you guys. But have we found out how to best take care of that?
Well, so investment is part of it, certainly, but it's also opening up the lines of communication. So what I just walked out of today before walking in here with you all is a Port Productivity Summit. It's our 3rd summit that we've had in the last 10 months. And what we do at these summits is bring every stakeholder to the table, whether that's labor, the freight forwarders, the motor carriers, the ship lines, Customs Border Patrol, everyone in the whole chain of the operation, so that we have an open and honest dialogue of where are the pinch points, who can control those pinch points, what can we do better. Each time we have a summit, an actionable list of items is produced, and then we follow up on those items. So it was good today because everyone around the table said we notice a difference. We see the changes that have been made. To speak to your point, though, VIG specifically had some difficulty with the surge of volume from the West Coast and the weather delays. It's an automated facility, so it literally got jammed. It wasn't operating at the optimal level. There were too many boxes. So if you needed box 2, you had to move 5, 4, 3 to get to 2. And so there were no places to put it. So we had to move significant amounts of cargo to PMT. We did that primarily by barging it. We would load it on the barge and just take it right down the river. And so it helped, and people are noticing a difference at VIG. And then we're also adding a rail yard there that will help, and I'll go into more detail.
What about Harper's Road?
Yeah, 'cause those
Harper, that was the problem over here on Harper.
Yes, sir. So you all have a pretty great staff, and you were able to pick up the phone, open the lines of communication, sit down with your chief of police, our port police, and dialogue, what can we do? We ended up as a team at the port sending out trucker text alerts and email alerts about the new paving,
Center lane.
the new lane striping, that's the word I'm
Right.
looking for, striping and change in the traffic patterns there. So that even though we can't control truckers, they're usually independent owners and operators,
Right.
we just encourage them to abide by the rules and regulations, and then we can enforce them on the terminal, and then you all have a great team that's enforcing them off the terminal. And so as long as we're giving them notice to abide by those and not blocking those business entrances so that ingress and egress is open, gave them notice, but ticketed after that, because you've got to enforce it. And
Yeah.
so we were able to sit down and have those discussions, and I hope that we can continue to check back in and monitor that both as a city and as a terminal operator.
Very good.
This next photo that you're looking at is just that right outside of Harper's Road. It's the Pinners Point Container Yard. This is just south of PMT, so you're looking at PMT right above 164 there. We had a unseasonably high level of empty containers for a while. We had to initiate significant evacuation programs, and that means you're requiring the ship lines to take their empty containers back. But what this photo in particular is pointing out is we have added RFID technology, so we can now measure the turn time of a truck on the empty container yard just like we can at all of our terminals. So this is helping us measure the flow of traffic on and off the empty container yard just like we would a turn time at VIG or PMT. So again, we're a pretty metric-driven organization, and we want to know how long the dwell time is for that box and for that trucker to get that box and get off the facility. The improvements that we are making at Virginia International Gateway is we are almost done with a new rail yard here. It's about 5 acres that we're paving, and the thought behind this is instead, once that box comes off the vessel, and it's not put into the typical stacks with all of the other boxes that are bound for the trucks. Because remember, it got boxed in, literally jammed up. It wasn't operating at optimal capacity. If you can pull the boxes that are destined for the rail off the vessel and separate them right away, then you never have to sort them out and pick, oh, is this a truck box or a rail box? Instead, you've sorted it out right away, and then it's loaded onto the rail throughout the day and exits the facility by night, usually. So that's what this is showing. This will come online. We'll be able to start this separation process on June 30th. We're on track and on budget, more importantly. So. And then, like I mentioned, opening the lines of communication. So we have been meeting regularly with our motor carrier task force, the port productivity summits that I just mentioned, and a customer service group. Prior to initiating this customer service group, folks who are experiencing difficulty on the terminals would just call whoever they knew on the terminal, whether that was the head guy or someone lower who maybe couldn't even affect change for that individual. So we created a customer service group that has expertise across the entire organization. We're able to measure who's calling, how they have been responded to, and what level of success that person has had after being funneled to our customer service group. So with things like that, we're able to monitor the level of service that we're providing specifically to the motor carriers. They're one of the biggest groups that are using this. Yes, Vice
Is
Mayor.
there a hotline or a number that we could know or should know that we can share with citizens who may call us about those issues?
That's a great point.
Particularly, oh, well, at either location, I guess.
Yes, ma'am. There is. It is the customer service number, and I can get that to you directly after this. It's on our website, but I can shoot it out. I'll send it to you, Madam Clerk, if I may, and for dissemination to council.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Is that website, is that public knowledge? To see the entrances? Is that open to the public?
Yes, it sure is. It's on our website. I can send the direct link to that because it is interesting to watch the
Well,
flow.
I can, when they call, I can say, you check it before you get there.
So, how does all of this relate
Exactly.
to our communities? And that's what is so important. In January, the College of William and Mary released an economic impact study. They studied our impact for the fiscal year 2013. And when they released the results, I was pleased and thought, I can't wait till we do this study again to see how we can increase this. But even with that, 9.4% of the workforce in Virginia is attributable, whether directly, indirectly, or induced through the operations right here in our waterways. $53.2 billion of value in goods is shipped out of your waterways right here, and 10.9 billion of those goods are made right here in Virginia, which is a good number. This equates to 6.9% of the gross state product across the Commonwealth, and about 61. Back to this workforce, 374,000 employees across the state, and again, that's direct, indirect, and induced jobs. but about 61,000 of those live right here locally. So they're spending money here. They're doing business in our Hampton Roads region. So we like to see that, and again, I can't wait till they study fiscal year 15 and see what we're doing. But more importantly, what's happening right here in Portsmouth? Our strategic analyst presented some data the other day that I thought was pretty interesting and wanted to share with you. These are our top importers and exporters located right here in Portsmouth. But more importantly, this third-party logistics providers, we are seeing a significant increase in third-party logistics providers locating in Portsmouth. So these are the freight forwarders, the brokers, the trucking companies, the people who are servicing the deals between the ship lines and the beneficial cargo owners. So these, I haven't listed them all to provide you with a more comprehensive list, but we're seeing a significant amount of third-party logistics providers locating their business here in Portsmouth.
Wouldn't we think that number should double with the opening of the Panama Canal and all of the services that may be required with opening and breaking this bulk up and making sure whatever gets to wherever? I think a lot of that's going to increase right here in, well, on the whole western side of the Elizabeth River, hopefully in Portsmouth, but I think with a lot of the available land in Suffolk and Isle of Wight and all, I mean, it should be great news for all of us here west of the Elizabeth River. But how many of those third party do you have? Do you know the total number right now, or the new ones?
I don't know the total number off the top of my head, but it was significant, more than I could fit on this slide.
Yeah.
And I can find you that total number if you would like.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
With the names?
And the names? Yes, sir. I can do that.
Ms. McCoy, the data that you had on the previous slide for the economic impact,
Yes, sir.
you mentioned there are 61,000 local employees. Does that include what group? The
regional Hampton Roads.
So does that include those that are working at the port, the truckers? That's you counting the truckers as employees also, or?
Yes, sir. So jobs that are either directly related to the Port of Virginia operations, indirectly related, or induced here because there is a port operation here.
Do you keep the demographic information on who those employees are and salaries?
William and Mary didn't go quite into each of the specific demographics, but they did go into salaries for the employees. Would you be interested in reading the entire study? Because I have it electronically and could forward it to you.
No, I was interested in if you keep the demographic information on who your employees are and salaries.
Oh, the Port of Virginia's demographic
Right.
information and their salaries?
Right.
Yes,
Oh,
that
there's
is.
61,000 that are local here. Now, the 374, that's
That's the
statewide.
entire Commonwealth,
Right,
yes,
right.
sir.
I was just curious, the 61,000 local here, if you have that information.
So, no, I do not have the demographics for the 61,000 locally.
Yeah, for your own employees, but not all the others.
For our own within the umbrella of the Port of Virginia, yes, I have access to those, but I don't have for
Indirect.
For indirect, right.
indirect or induced.
Can we get the direct employee demographics?
I can check on that.
Okay.
Sir, how much warehouse space has been constructed to accommodate the goods that are imported? Do you have that figure, and where most of that's been?
Most of that is within more than 50 miles away from the port. So we've seen a significant increase in warehousing. That is one industry that's doing very well right now. I have it broken down as where we rate on the East Coast with primary warehousing space. That's anything between 1 to 50 miles outside of the gates of the port, and then anything 50 to, I believe it's 300 miles outside of the gate is considered secondary markets. And so you'll, I can flip to it in just a second. It'll be up any second now,
Okay,
and we'll see
that's
how
fine.
we rank. But that is an industry that's doing particularly well right now.
I would think so.
Yes, we're seeing a significant growth in the warehousing and distribution. This is our Aid to Local Ports program. So the Code of Virginia requires that we serve as an importer and exporter, but it also requires us to facilitate the commerce along the local waterways. And so the Portsmouth Parks and Rec applied for a project, a $250,000 project, and it was for a fishing pier in City Park. We were able to assist that project by giving them $187,500, and so we can't wait for ground to break and to see this come to fruition. We think it was a worthwhile project, and we hope that it benefits the city as a whole. In addition, in the last 12 to 24 months, the Port of Virginia has an emergency management and incident response team that applies for security grants, and we like to give assistance in the marine incident response arena in our local waterways. So we were able to contribute over $40,000 in equipment to the Portsmouth Fire Department and Police Department as they build up their marine firefighting and police teams. So it's a good collaboration, and we hope to see that continue because we all know how important it is to ensure the safety on our waterways. And so getting to talk about our competitiveness, Portsmouth and this region as a whole is located in Foreign Trade Zone 20. This is important with folks like Ms. Kaler and her economic development team and our in-house economic development team, and really helps us market this area, as we're not, folks who locate here are not subject to the same import and export duties. So it's a real advantage when we're going out and marketing this area to potential distribution and manufacturing centers. In addition, we were just granted the Intercontinental Exchange designation. So what this is it allows exchange grade coffee stored in our regional exchange license warehouses to make deliveries against the futures contracts. So this will come to fruition in 2016, but it's also another great marketing tool for the coffee industry that we're seeing pop up. And so what comes to mind specifically for Portsmouth is our Massimo Zanetti friends right down the road. They'll significantly benefit from this. The only other ports who have this designation would be Houston, New Orleans, Miami, and New York. So we're the 5th port to have this designation. So again, it's aiding in our competitiveness. But speaking to Councilman Moody's question earlier about our warehousing capacity, the Port of Virginia is leading in overall warehouse capacity. But as you can see from this graph, most of that capacity is in the secondary market. Again, a secondary market is defined as anything within 300 miles of the port. Primary market is anything within 50 miles. So we rank relatively on the lower end of the scale for the primary market, but we are leading with warehouse capacity as a whole.
So what's that strategy? To just get it out of town so we're not cluttering up the local? I mean, you're only at 199 there. Is it beneficial to have that number grow here locally
We want to see that grow here locally.
Within the 50-mile radius, right?
Yes, it reduces costs for shippers to be closer to their facilities, and so we're a very urban area, so we're not we don't have an abundance of available warehousing space in that primary market. And we're seeing that growth more in our secondary market, but we would love to see that primary number grow, because if you note, New York, New Jersey, Savannah, they have significantly higher primary markets, so that's an area that we definitely want to see some growth in. The next area that we often watch our East Coast port cities is in our depth. We are currently at 50 feet of depth in our harbor. We're congressionally authorized to go to 55 feet of depth. But just to give you some perspective as to how we rank on the East Coast, New York, New Jersey is currently at 45 feet of depth, and they're going to 50. They also have to overcome an additional obstacle of a height restriction. The Bayonne Bridge is currently too low for those large vessels to have access to their facilities. So they have initiated literally $1 billion project to heighten the Bayonne Bridge significantly, sufficiently enough for those vessels to access their terminals.
$1 billion.
Baltimore is at 50 feet at present, and they will remain at 50 feet. They have not articulated a plan to go any deeper. Our advantage over Baltimore is literally it's another day's travel to pass our facilities here right on our waterways to go up north to Baltimore. So why not just process your cargo here in our waterways than make that additional trip? Charleston is at 45, and they're actively pursuing 50 feet of depth. Savannah is at 42, and the Army Corps of Engineers has said that they, due to the geological makeup of their riverbed, can likely only go to 47. Jacksonville is at 40, Miami is at 45 with plans to go to 50. So that kind of shows you where we rank. We're at present the deepest, to remain the deepest. The vessels are getting larger. We're routinely receiving vessels that are 9,000 plus TEUs, so 9,000 containers. To put that in perspective, the Panama Canal at present can only accommodate 5,000 TEU vessels. Upon its complete expansion, which is estimated to be in the second quarter of 2016, they'll be able to accommodate 12,500 TEU vessels. So we're already getting ships that are larger than the current Panama Canal, and those are coming through the Suez Canal.
You are getting 12,000 now on some of them, right?
We have gotten a 12. It's not regularly calling. We will likely see that becoming a more consistent service, but consistently it's 9 and 9,500 TEU vessels.
Right.
Yes, today
But we can
I was
accommodate the 12.5 now.
Yeah.
Ma'am. Yes.
I think they can go up to like 14. That's why, like 14 TUs. I know some bigger ships coming because I was
Yes, they're coming. They're already coming through the Suez Canal.
Yeah, right.
And this is just showing you a more detailed picture of our harbor. What you're seeing in blue is where we're presently at 50 feet. The dotted line is where we want to go to 55 feet. And most notably, the Elizabeth River, what you see in yellow, is we want to go to 45 feet there. I believe it was last Wednesday, I'm getting my days mixed up, but last week, the Army Corps of Engineers in the Port of Virginia signed a cost share agreement. So this was a significant step because that was the kickoff for the 3-year general reevaluation study to dredge our harbor to 55 feet. So what that means is they'll study, make sure that we are still in good shape, that we can go deeper and wider, and then after the completion of the study, then they can plan out a path for constructing that deeper harbor. So it has begun. So I can't wait to come back and give you updates on that as it progresses. But in that project, like I mentioned, the Elizabeth River would go to 45 feet. It's presently at about 40, but there's significant variation.
Will the proposed Patriot Crossing, is that going to have an impact on any of this?
That is so when they do the general reevaluation plan, they have to take into account all present and future planned tunnels. So that's something that they certainly consider when they evaluate how deep they can go in our waterways. So they're taking into account the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, Monitor Merrimack, that sort of thing already. And so they would have to consider any future tunnel construction as well. That's a good question. And so where are we going in the future? What you're looking at is the rendering of Virginia International Gateway. What is presently there today is that lower section, and so that top square of containers isn't there today, but that is engineered and permitted already. So when they did the original construction back in 2003, they engineered and permitted the entire facility. Then to the north of that, you're seeing the future Craney Island Marine Terminal. And then it's hard to see, but you're looking here at what would be the third crossing coming out there. So it comes out of Norfolk Marine Terminal right between NIT and the Naval Base, and then cuts across Craney Island and connects to the Monitor Merrimack there. So this is where we want and plan to grow. So we have the capacity for phase 2 of VIG, Craney Island, and then at NIT, although we cannot expand our footprint there, we have a plan to change the conveyance method there so that we can have denser stacks, more cargo containers in a smaller footprint. So that's what we would be doing at NIT. But this is the future, this is what we're working towards, and I'm happy to answer any questions for you.
You got a year for the cranial expansion? What year are we looking at?
2040.
40?
2040.
That's a moving target.
Yes, sir.
Sarah, that's a very competitive industry. Who's the more aggressive competition? Is it Savannah?
Savannah.
Well, they're certainly growing at a very fast rate right now. They would probably, actually Charleston is the fastest growing port on the East Coast based on the 2014 numbers. And again, I don't have 2015, even for fiscal year 2015. But those are kind of the battling brothers down in the South, Savannah and Charleston. So.
Very good.
How much of an advantage have we calculated with the whole Heartland corridor, us putting all that stuff and got all that infrastructure in place, getting out to Chicago? How much advantage is that going to put us at versus these other ports when this huge influx of Connex boxes start coming this way?
It's significant advantage. It's such that we can now reach a third of the nation's population within a day's travel. And what is happening is we have about 66% of cargoes moved by truck, and then 33% by rail as a port as a whole. And we're the highest out of all of our East Coast ports with the highest amount of cargo moved by rail. So it helps us significantly, and we're able to access wider swaths of the country and tap into greater levels of consumer bases.
But when you're out striking a deal and you're trying to convince this liner to come to Portsmouth instead of New York, and I can get your box to Chicago in 24 hours?
Yes.
And how long is it taking them if they go to New York, and what are the downsides of going to New York instead of coming here?
It's a bit more transit time, but what New York is servicing is their backyard 18 million person consumer base. And so I think a lot of the ship liners recognize that they don't have, they're not planning to grow out west like we are, and we have really focused our efforts there.
Well, they need most of the stuff right there in New York, so anything going outside of that is going to be secondary. So
Exactly.
if we can convince them that they'll be our top priority, then this could be the next.
And that's exactly where our plan is as well. And what's significant to note is CSX is also pursuing dual rail or dual stack capability. They have one pinch point that is keeping them from having dual stack at present. That's in DC, the Virginia Avenue Tunnel. And construction is underway at present to raise that tunnel so that they too can have dual stack. And we see that as another advantage. We have 2 Class 1 railroads in our area. We're very blessed to have that here in our region, and pretty soon.
And they're working together.
Yes, yes, they are. But we'll see an additional growth in the rail SCSX pursuits.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to comment that, you know, in
This is our
my 10
liaison, by the way, our vice mayor.
In my 10 years working back and forth with this council, we've never had the kind of cooperation with the Port of Virginia that we've had since Mr. Reinhardt took over. Ms. McCoy is at every PPIC meeting. She's coming to EDA things, other things, back and forth. She's in touch all the time, and it's really nice.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I think it's important that we keep these lines of communication open, and I hope you'll have me back again to give you future updates.
Thank you. Question.
Thank you. Dr. Waters?
Question. The whole toll issue, what impact is that going to have as far as the increases that will occur that's expected each year? Is that going to have any impact on operations or competitiveness?
We're growing west. West is where there's land, and west is where that future growth is anticipated. And so I don't know that tolls are going to hold anybody back from, I mean, they won't even need to use tolls with the growth that's coming. I mean, folks will still use NIT. There will be a lot of cargo processed through there, but our growth is on this side of the river.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good job. Now, where's my buddy at, Andrew?
He's studying. She's local.
Okay. All right, sir.
Okay. Our next item is going to be a presentation by our consultant on the disparity study. I'm going to ask our purchasing administrator, Mike Ammons, to introduce the team and get them underway with their PowerPoint presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, members of council, staff, and visitors. I'm here to introduce the team from MGT that performed the city's procurement disparity study. To my right here is Dr. Vince Egan. This is Ms. Bernetta Mitchell. Right here is Ms. Marilyn Wiley, and they're members of MGT, and they'll be proceeding, going through this summary of our study.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, City Council. You please have to forgive me. I have caught a terrible summer cold, so I'm going to be taking short breaths as I try to get my thoughts together. But I brought some backup with me today, so I don't have to talk the whole time, and you guys don't have to hear me cough the whole time. But well, thank you very much for having us. We are excited about presenting the 2015 procurement disparity study results. From what I understand, you have copies of the report as well as the presentation. So we'd like to just go through some high-level details just to give you, the bottom line. What do we find, and what are our recommendations for the report? Our outline today will introduce our project team. We have more than just the three of us that are here today that worked diligently on your study. Then we'll talk a little bit about the study's background, what was our foundation, the legal framework of conducting a disparity study in your particular circuit, the disparity study results for your prime utilization. Then we have a comparison of what your utilization looks like to other cities comparable in the region. Then we'll talk about anecdotal information, what was some of the anecdotal feedback that we got from business owners that we interviewed. We'll talk about the private sector, which is also a very important component to determining whether or not disparity exists in the utilization of MWBEs in the marketplace. Then we'll talk about accommodations, recommendations, and then we'll go into questions and answers. Our team today, excuse me, our team consisted of several members that are not here. Mr. Reggie Smith is our partner in charge at MGT. He had a conflict today, couldn't be here, so he sends his regards. And then myself, I was the project manager for this particular project and also a senior consultant with MGT. Dr. Vince Egan is our technical advisor, and you'll hear from Dr. Egan in a few minutes. Ms. Marilyn Wiley was the lead data manager. She was the one that spent countless hours looking at thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of data. I don't want her job at all. Ms. Lee Brazil with Transformation Consulting, and Mr. Bruce Williams also with Transformation Consulting were our sub-consultant on the project. They helped with some of the anecdotal information. And Ms. Annalise Oppenheim was also a sub-consultant. She helped with the survey and the custom census. For your procurement disparity study, we looked at 5 different business categories: construction, architecture and engineering, professional services, other services, and goods and supplies. The time period that we looked at, the snapshot in time that we looked at for this study was from 2008, July 1, 2008 to June 30th of 2013, so a 5-year time period where we pulled all of your payment data and analyzed your spending with minority and women-owned firms for that time period. This is the city's first disparity study, which we commend you on that. This will give you the factual predicate to move forward with whatever your plans are with this study if you want to implement an MWBE program. There were some limitations to this study, and as a first study, it's not uncommon to find that agencies don't know what they don't know. And saying that is that subcontractor data is very important. And with this being your first study, you did not know that subcontractor data was important to the study. But now you know. So, and Mr. Ammons, I've already briefed Mr. Ammons that we need to start collecting that information.
Okay.
And also there was very minimal subcontractor data in the permits data that we pulled for the private sector utilization as well. But with all that being said, you still had very good participation in the prime utilization, which we'll talk about in a second. I'm gonna let Dr. Egan, I'm gonna take a quick break here, let Dr. Egan come up and talk about the legal framework, and then Ms. Wiley will come up and talk about the disparity results. Let me just push that. Oops. Sorry, went too far.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor, Ms. Vice Mayor. And we'll be doing a little whack-a-mole of coming up and down. I apologize for that. In terms of the frame, these studies are driven by a legal framework, and which there's a lot, and there's a legal chapter in the study. But just in a nutshell, it comes from a Supreme Court decision, Richmond v. Croson, not too far down the road, about 25 years ago. And basically, if you're going to take some affirmative measures in the contracting area or employment area, you have to identify a problem. You can't simply do something because you want to do something. And if you identify a problem, your remedy has to fit the problem that you identified. So it has to be what they call narrowly tailored. You can't simply do whatever you want to do for however long you want to do it. In some of the subsequent case law, they have found that you can justify taking these affirmative measures even if you did not identify a problem with the agency itself, but you identified a problem in the private sector that is connected in some way to the agency. The most relevant decision here in the Fourth Circuit, which includes the City of Portsmouth, is H.B. Rowe v. Tippett. This was the first case really upholding an affirmative action, a minority business program in several decades in this circuit, which had not been that friendly. And that program was upheld based on a study done by MGT, and I was the expert witness on that study. So we have some familiarity for what courts do accept and do not accept in this area. And I've served as expert witness in other parts of the country on this particular issue. What we're going to do, and we'll probably try it also in flowing from this framework, is to present some highlights of the results as a whole, and then take questions, because some of the things we'll see, well, how can you base it on this, and it's just that. And when you see the whole picture, we think we'll have a better picture of where we're going with this. So Marilyn's going to talk about some of the disparity results with prime contract.
Before she does it, can you just explain what does narrowly tailored mean?
It goes back to the idea, for example, if you said, 55% of Portsmouth is minorities, so therefore, from here to the end of time, 55% of contracting dollars should go to minorities as a quota. That would not be a narrowly tailored result, right? You first need to say, what is the business population here? Were they getting work or not getting work? Are you responding, even in trying to encourage more inclusion, are you doing it in a flexible way that limits the burden on all parties in the marketplace? Are you trying to use as many race-neutral measures as possible as a starting point to try to get it? So you may have an objective of trying to increase the inclusion of women and minorities in contracting and projects, but you have to do it in a narrowly tailored way. And that tends to be what the judges care about the most, is how you design your response to the issue. They kind of know there's an issue, but how is your how do you respond to that issue is what they tend to get most involved in.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. They always leave the hard part for me. I always get the short end of the stick, but I'm getting used to it. But first, before we go into the disparity results, I want to explain to you exactly what the disparity indices are. And if it's an index of 100, that means that there is parity and is proportionate between the utilization and the availability. If it's between 80 and 100, it's considered underutilization, but it's really not significant. And if it's anything that's at 80, we consider that, or 80 and below, that's significant or substantial underutilization or disparity. And if it's an index of 100 and greater, we consider that as overutilized. Okay? For your construction category, and before I move forward, we left out architecture and engineering because it was a reflection of zeros, and so we felt it's in the report, but just not in the presentation. For construction, for the non-WMBEs, they had an index of 106.90. That means they were overutilized because they were, of course, over 100. And for non-minority women, they were substantially underutilized. And for African Americans, they were also substantially underutilized. And if you see zeros, that means that we did not have any utilization for those vendors at all.
Is that done by, okay.
Yes, sir.
Is that done by contract amounts, dollar amounts? How did you arrive at that number?
This is a comparison between the percentage of those that was utilized based on the contracts let to those vendors compared to those that were considered to be available, meaning ready, willing, and able in the area to do the work.
It is dollar amounts.
And it's by dollar amounts, the dollars that were.
So if a contract is $10 million, that number will shoot up, correct?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the comparison.
Yeah.
For one particular contract, if you added it to this, is that what you're asking?
Now, what I'm at, we have one utility contract that's $10 million, right? Isn't it $10 million, Brandon?
One phase of it is, yes.
One phase, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Would that manipulate the numbers?
Yeah. And I should say,
Because I mean, if you take that one number away, then does all the numbers line up? Because I mean, that's the biggest contract we have, correct, Brandon?
To the best of my knowledge.
yeah. I mean, let me say something too, that this is always just a starting point.
All right.
You know, we look at it in, for example, we did a regression analysis,
Right.
controlling for the size of the firm, number of employees, other things like that, to see, do you still have disparities after you control for a number of factors.
Right.
In fact, many of these then went away.
Right.
It did continue for African Americans.
Right.
We did find continued disparities once you controlled for a lot of other factors using statistical controls.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's kind of, you know, with not even having the women part or all the parts of, you know, that's kind of disturbing.
Yes, and we have done some studies where we even took outliers out. What we mean by outliers are those people that got those heavy contracts, $10 million contracts. So we've done a lot of different analysis, but for this particular one, we only we included all contracts that were let during the study period.
Yeah, just that one.
So that means what Danny just asked is if there was an anomaly in there, it could skew the numbers.
Right.
So it could be worse if some minority got a $10 million contract from the city and he was the only one and we hadn't done that in 20 or 30 years, that would make that number look better than what it really should be, right?
Yeah.
And you're saying if you remove that, then it shows that we're worse than what we...
And that's where I go back to talking about the whole picture.
Okay.
Because it's true. This by itself does not give you the whole picture of what's going on.
Because the contract, that utility piece, I mean, I know you can't do it now, but if you took that one piece out, I would like to see where the numbers then fall.
What time period was that contract? Because you remember the time period that we're looking at.
What is,
2008 to 2013.
it was in there. Yeah.
It was during that period.
Well, that can be done. Yeah, that can be done.
It was utility.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
A minority vendor?
No, it wasn't.
No.
Vice Mayor's got a question, then we'll let you do your thing, and then we'll come back with
I
questions.
apologize.
That's all right, you're good, you're good. I like the question.
And this is my ignorance in this, and I tried to find it and I couldn't find it. Do we have a feel for how many Hispanic American, Asian American, and Native American vendors of any of these pieces are even available?
It's very small.
And it's in the actual report. We did a separate availability analysis, and for each category, we listed how many of each ethnicity vendors were
Where is
available.
that? I swear I looked.
It's chapter 5.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Excuse me.
Who has the floor?
The $10 million utility contract that is being discussed, would that be under construction or would that be under another category?
Good question. It depends on what type of work was let on that particular $10 million. Some of the $10 million could have been for construction. It could have been architecture, engineering. You could have just bought goods and supplies like construction supplies, or it could have been professional consultants that came in to do a blueprint or something, or aerial photography. So we take that, and even though the $10 million probably was for construction, if it was different types of business categories that went there, we split that $10 million up to whatever vendor it went to.
Right. And
So the whole
this is just purely looking at construction.
Construction, right.
And
If
that's
they
what
got
that
any
was.
money
That was all
to do any
utility
kind
work.
of construction services.
The availability numbers start at table 5-1.
Yes.
And it goes through for
I
each
see.
of the business
Thank you.
categories based on your vendors.
A lot of women-owned businesses out there. I was just shocked that that number wasn't higher.
In the construction category? Or?
Yeah, I mean, because of the shipyard and stuff, I just figured, it's a lot of women-owned businesses I know I deal with.
And one of the things we're going to see in this too is that this is primes, and we're going to see later that quite often if you have a program about it, it's more about subcontract. And we have seen in this area, there is demonstrated, as you point out, availability of women and minority subcontractors who've gotten work with agencies in this area. And I think when you see some of the some of the problems starting with disparity, it sort of starts with a negative vibe. But when we do the comparison thing, it's not so, it's going to give you a little different picture when you look at the comparison to, say, the city of Hampton, just at the prime level.
Would any of this be driven by a bond, requiring bond work?
Certainly for prime
For
contractors,
primes,
that makes it
it-
hard. That's a barrier to getting
Right.
prime work.
Right.
All right.
We'll shut up now.
So for your professional services category, the non-WMBEs, they were underutilized at 92.73 indices or index. The non-minority women were substantially underutilized or substantial disparity. Asian Americans were overutilized with 284.96. African Americans overutilized as professional service consultants.
What?
What makes up professional service consultants? I knew that was going to be a question.
It's got to be engineering.
So professional service consultants are us. We're professional service consultants, attorneys, doctors, legal staff, notaries, not necessarily teachers, but professional development trainers that come in and teach your staff different things. Those are professional service type firms. And so we had huge participation of African American firms in professional services.
That's great.
For your other services, and maybe I should start by explaining what's in these different categories. For other services, it's like non-major painting, like if you call someone in just to paint a room or something that's not considered to be construction or architecture engineering. Janitorial services, lawn services, security.
Print shops, printers, things of that nature.
So it's anything that really does not consider you to have a license to do the work. Professional services, you actually have to have a license to proceed with doing that work. And for other services, the non-WMBEs was 83.37. That is underutilization, but it's not substantial. It only gets substantial below the 80. Non-minority women were overutilized, and African Americans were overutilized in that area. And the goods and supplies, that's your everyday office supplies, maybe getting tires, paper, just local, other things that is not really a service, but it's a material type thing. And for the non-minorities, they got 104, which was overutilization. Non-minority women were substantially underutilized. Hispanic Americans were overutilized, and there you have it.
Yeah.
When you say goods and supplies, it's got like, you said paper, what was some of
Yeah,
them?
like papers, pencils,
Vehicles, chairs, office furniture,
tires.
intangible products.
Everybody should.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead. Doing good.
And this section is for this.
Yeah, one of the things people were interested in was sort of comparing to the city of Hampton. City of Hampton has an MWBE program. I've had one for, I don't know, 5, 6 years. They've done 2 disparity studies. But it's important to understand about their program, it's mainly about subcontracting, about encouraging prime contractors to use women and minorities as subcontractors. So at the prime level, like the city of Portsmouth, they don't have, though they're trying to encourage utilization at the prime level, they don't have race or gender-based incentives for that. So this table just sort of gives some numbers, and you probably can see them better on your handout than up here, comparing the city of Portsmouth to the city of Hampton. One of the things you see that in architecture and engineering, neither one of them have gotten any utilization there. So the fact that you're low there is not really surprising, because that's the same thing here. And you'll see that in other areas, professional services doing much better than the city of Hampton.
Yeah, Dan, good.
Brandon, question. The firm that is doing our engineering with James and them, that's a minority firm, right?
We have several. I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
Because I mean, even minority or non-minority, they wouldn't show up in that category? Because I know y'all do stuff with a couple of different ones.
Are they subcontractors or are they acting as prime? Because the numbers
They should be
represented as
prime. I
We
think
have several annual engineering contracts.
Right.
And it depends on the need, the scope of work, and the expertise. And I can't tell you which ones. I really don't know. I'd have to ask James, and I'm sure he's not here tonight. So.
No, one thing about these,
It wouldn't have been included in that study. They weren't.
Oh, because it was in 13?
That's right. You got to take into account the study period.
Yeah,
Anything more
13,
recently.
yeah, there's sort of 2 things about what, because we did go over with staff the numbers we have. We produce the numbers, and then the staff goes under the underlying detail, and we make revisions. There are 2 reasons why it may differ with your perceptions. One, the time period of the study, as you pointed out. The other, this is based on the relevant market, which is roughly the Hampton, Norfolk MSA. Right, so we're focusing on comparing availability and utilization there. So if a firm comes from outside of that, it's not part of these numbers, though you may have in fact used them.
So wait a minute. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So if the black woman-owned engineering firm out of Richmond has a contract, could bid, they're not included because they're
Outside of
they're too far away.
They're not included in this comparison.
Okay.
You know, we typically present what the whole numbers are, but we have to do, so for example, let's say you had a firm from Los Angeles, right? Well, we can't really bring in availability from Los Angeles,
Right.
so we got to sort of compare the same. That's why where you get into a problem.
You've drawn your circle.
Yeah, so that's the problem there.
If I could add, I did do an analysis where it showed your overall utilization. It's in the appendix. So regardless of where the market area was, I included all the dollars for each category, but it's in your appendix.
I got it.
See all of it.
So the basic point, without getting into details, are areas where you're better than the city of Hampton, areas where you're slightly below, based on this comparison at the prime level. But what is significant, though we couldn't what evidence we could see from talking to the subcontractors, from looking at the building permits, we did try to look at your files as well, we did not find much evidence of women and minorities being used as subcontractors here.
Right.
Whereas Hampton was able to, just in construction, get $3.5 million over a 5-year period with women and minority subcontractors. So there are firms out there, who've done work in construction as subcontractors. So it's not, just hypothetical. And we could not find evidence on your projects where we could find it. And that's significant because that should probably be the priority if you're trying to address issues here. I think we now go to anecdotal.
What I'm trying to figure out, like I see in the wanted ads, they're always looking for DBEs and women-owned business. Is that kind of we could plug that in, let's say, a big utility contract, like the $10 million one, to make sure they hit a percentage mark of using women-owned, so we can hit some of these marks?
That's what a number, yeah, we're going to talk about that in recommendations. That is one approach. And it's easier to do on very large contracts.
Right.
When very large contracts, firms are used to that around the country, so it's not a surprise.
Now, all the numbers that we've shown you, Vince, here's your water. I definitely don't want to get it mixed up. You'd be mad at me for a long time. What we've shown you are all the quantitative data that we've received from your actual data and ran the analysis. And so the qualitative information that's just as important is more so putting a face to the numbers. So from anecdotal sampling, we did several things. We had a public hearing. There were 36 attendees, 16 individuals or firms gave testimony at the public hearing. We had a focus group. We had 17 participants at the focus group. We had 514 participants in a survey of vendors that we did. And we had 28 interviewees during the personal interviews. And so then we take all of that anecdotal information and look for trends that rise to the top of what are firms consistently saying about it. The other thing about the anecdotal sampling is that if a firm is selected to participate in either the survey, the focus group, or interview, they're not participating in anything else, so that broadens our pool of firms that we talk to. The public hearing is the only anecdotal activity in which a firm may also get pulled for a survey of vendors, because it is a public meeting for any and everyone to come to if they so choose. So we've got a lot of input and feedback from firms on their experience doing business with the city's primes, or in the private sector during the study period. So one of the largest concerns was competing with large firms, and many small firms always talk about, you're bundling a whole lot of contracts where only large firms can actually provide a proposal or submit a bid on. That's usually a concern. So 34% of the MWBE primes said that competing with large companies is one of their major barriers. Some of the other issues that primes had, MWBE primes, was the selection process, contracts being too large, and the specifications being too specific for its particular vendor or particular product. For subcontractors, because even though we did not do a subcontractor analysis with you, we did identify how many firms that participated in the anecdotal activities were primes or subs or both, if they could do both of them. So subcontractors said that competing with large firms is also a barrier for them doing business, and contracts being too large as well. And there's several more tables in there that will break down some of these anecdotal. But these, these are the ones that rose to the top for us.
That's normally a trend with all, whether it's a municipality or government. It's easier to take everything and find Bob who can do everything, and then your contract guy doesn't have to work, nobody else. They put it there and then they leave it and reside it with this major prime to break it up and do all of those things that our office wouldn't do, because we got one person and it's easier for that one or two people to just let the whole thing out. And so it hurts all of these other businesses, because we're intentionally lazy, or it's just easier to get the contract out on the street and get it off of our procurement office. And it shows hurting these contractors because it is bundled.
To some degree, yes. I mean, government's shrinking to a degree, so you have to find a way to get things done easily and efficiently. To address some of these, there are a couple recommendations that we made to try to overcome some of this. But this is not uncommon for us to see, because government is shrinking. So you may have a procurement staff of 2, 3, 1 who's trying to do everything, and they try to find the best way to get it done. We need it fast, we need it quick, we need it efficient, we need quality, lowest responsible, responsive bidder if it's a low bid scenario, best, technical proposal if it's an RFP type situation. And so there are ways to work through getting participation and overcome some of these. But this is a common theme that we see.
And the reason I asked that is the thing that's going to fly back in your face is now I need to get this contract out on the street and 30 days, and now you're implementing this program, and now it's taking us 90 days because you're telling us we need to break this. I mean, you're going to get beat over the head no matter what unless you're really committed to this, and you're saying before we get to level X here, we need to make sure we got the right pool in place so we can do that.
And plan ahead.
And plan ahead instead of showing up at the last minute saying we got to put a $1 million roof on IC Norcom. It needs to be done next week, and the only guy can do it is Bob. Okay, and Bob can assure you he'll have it done by the fall of next year when school opens, so we give it to Bob, and everybody else is in trouble.
One thing that I will say is that firms in the area that do government work understand these programs very well, and typically, not all, but typically, they have MWBE firms that they partner with all the time. And so they meet and that sometimes blocks out new firms that want to do work. But if you have that situation where you have a short period of time you need to get something done, and Bob is the one that you're going to select, Bob has the firms, MWBE firms that he usually works with. He knows their work routine. He's going to meet the goal using those firms. So it's kind of a catch-22, double-edged sword. Yes, sir.
Is it, when they say it's too large, are they talking about the scope of work or the dollar value?
Dollars.
So,
which equates to scope as well in most cases.
Well, not all the time, but
I would note, though, compared to our other surveys, those three are lower than we usually hear from contractors about selection process, specification. It's actually low. I mean, we tend to get numbers more like in the 20s and low 30s% of contractors complain about these issues. So that's actually on the low side compared to our other surveys, just FYI.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, you're talking about these prime, and I know the three of us do this for a living. I own a travel agency. And I got my SWAM certification because the woman who does it for WM Jordan, which has nothing to do with travel, walked me through it. So, I mean, these big companies, like you say, have whole departments that do this and do it regularly. And I mean, if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't have it. And then our own economic development department has some really great, day-long things where they bring in the folks from Richmond and pair people up and let you have, one-on-one meetings. I mean, it's a lot of work for the business, but, it can be very beneficial. But, I mean, these big guys, I don't think it's any problem to tell these big guys anything. They're used to doing, everybody around here is used to doing business with the government. They know how to do this.
That's right. That's right. And I used to work for one of those big guys, and that's exactly what I would do.
So what we're saying here with our program is you just want to make sure that you set the parameters for these big guys, that if you want to do business with Portsmouth, you need to go get Elizabeth and all these other small folks, folks like that already on your team, so we don't have these issues. And if you want to keep coming here without those folks, then we're going to continue to have issues, right? We're just formalizing so it isn't a onesie twosie. You help and put it out for everybody.
That's exactly right. Well put, Mr. Mayor. With respect to disparate treatment, there are several questions in all of our anecdotes that ask questions about whether or not they feel they've been discriminated against. And the surveys are not restricted to MWBE firms, so it's all firms that are randomly selected, so non-minority firms answer these questions as well. But with respect to disparate treatment, 21% of the 81 MWBE respondents said that the informal network precludes their firms from obtaining work in the private sector. So the private sector has that little network, and it's hard for MWBE firms to break into that. 9.23%, or 35 of the MWBE respondents, says that if there were no MWBE goals on a project, that they're not solicited to come work on a project. So when you begin to put goals, more MWBE firms will be solicited. Where there are no goals, they're not being solicited to provide bids. And being dropped from a project after being included to satisfy good faith effort requirements, 10.29%, or 39 of the respondents says that that happens to them. So a part of the program, should you move forward and implement a program, is compliance. Absolutely, is that if someone suggests that Vernetta Mitchell is going to work on my project, that someone from the city is following up to make sure that Vernetta Mitchell is working on the project.
And we can't rely on those folks to come and rat them out because they won't get work anywhere else.
That's right.
So we have to go and put the checkpoints in place to see that we're giving this person that work that they said they would do in the bid.
And the percentage.
And the percentages and all that.
And that they're doing it.
Right, and,
well,
and they're doing it and all that. But a lot of them don't police it, and the sub isn't saying anything because they don't want to get cut out of the next time around.
Sometimes the sub doesn't even know that they were proposed on a proposal. Right. So how am I supposed to know?
We'll send them a congratulations letter. That's what we do.
Well, I did that one time.
Congratulations, you won.
Yeah, and the sub won a $40,000 10-week contract and didn't even know that they were submitted on the proposal. I said, oh, well, congratulations, you just got a contract and didn't even have to work for it. In the private sector, yeah, Vince, you want to talk? Thank you very much. You talk about that for me.
Yeah, you've been making it.
Give me a little bit of break.
We did a lot of extensive work on the private sector, some econometric analysis of census data, loan denial data. This is just a subset, small subset of it, looking at building permits and what evidence there, and we found very low participation at prime type permits and subcontractor type permits for women and minority owned firms, and we found that consistent with the anecdotal findings that were mentioned earlier. So the basic point here is that in the city of Hampton, where they have a program for subcontracting, we saw significant levels of utilization. When you get out of that, both here and other private sector commercial, we could not find women and minorities being used extensively where there was not a program. We could not find evidence of that. But we could find evidence that they did exist and could be utilized and could get work done where there are incentives to do that. Now, in terms of recommendations, we also had commendations in here as well, but in terms of recommendations, a couple of broad brush points. First of all, I would prefer not to give recommendations at all. I mean, that is, we just give the evidence and that you do with it what you want to do with it. We're really not a law firm per se. Number two, you're not compelled to do anything with this. You know, this information does not compel you to do anything. Number three, we have gone from, we used to give very detailed and lengthy recommendations, and we've gone to a different approach. We give a broad sort of overview approach, and then we include what's called selected practices. Like we just have an appendix which shows what a lot of other agencies do, different techniques that they do. Because what we found that in the past, we would do 5 or 6 pages of things, and then people would come back to the agency and said, well, how come you didn't do that? How come you didn't do that? How come, you know, the consultant said all these things, you didn't do them. Why not? So we found that sort of put people more in a bind, and this approach we have is more of a menu kind of approach. The things in the appendix, you can look at what other agencies do. The broad philosophical approach to these programs, we think, and it's been upheld many times by the courts, is what's used. You mentioned the DBE program, the Federal Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. And the way that one works is you set a broad aspirational goal, right, for how you want inclusion. And it's just aspirational. It's not a quota. It's just sort of a benchmark of where you're trying to get, which is related to some reasonable measure of business availability in the area. And then you use techniques, again, most importantly, race and gender neutral techniques, to try to reach that goal. But you supplement it with, for example, subcontractor goals, which you mentioned.
Right.
That we say, okay, we've got this $10 million project. We think we've seen in this area, we've got about 15% availability. We'd like you to shoot for trying to get 15% of this contract to qualified women and minority contractors who submit reasonable bids for this work. And if you can't do that, you need to kind of explain why you can't do that. I mean, you can sort of say, well, we really couldn't find anybody. Their bids were absurd. Fine, but that's what you'd like you to do. And include, if somebody else is doing it in the marketplace or in other projects, then you don't have a very good argument if somebody else can accomplish this. But again, you want flexibility. You want to limit the burden on primes, and on other firms in the marketplace, but you're trying to just have more inclusion on projects. And that approach has been upheld by the courts. Again, that can be supplemented with race and gender neutral things. I'm from the Atlanta area. I teach at Morehouse College. And one technique that they use there, they say if you're doing a big project, you have to joint venture with somebody who doesn't look like you. So even if you're a big minority firm, like Herman Russell down there, he's got a joint venture with a non-African American firm. And that has generated tens of millions of dollars of utilization, and it's arguably a race neutral approach. They also have a thing where they
define that race neutral.
Well, since it applies to everybody, it's a racial classification, but it's not a preference for anybody, because everybody has to meet the same rule. So in that sense, it's race and gender neutral. Another one is just, we're just going to have rotation, like we get diverse teams, say in professional services, which you're doing okay in there, but in architecture and engineering, your teams are diverse, but everybody gets a bite of the apple. We sort of pre-qualify a group of firms and kind of spread the work out amongst them, so you're kind of rotating. So there are a number of different techniques and approaches beyond simply subcontractor goals.
Yeah.
If we decide to go this, I know this is, but don't you see more people going to VA-owned businesses too for the veteran-owned business as well?
Service disabled veterans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have found that is a very hot area. It's likely to be hot in this area.
It's hot here, right? And if we're going to do it, I think we should do the whole. I'm just.
And that's a race and gender neutral.
Right.
Classification.
And we've seen it done both ways. Like the state of Florida has a veterans program, a number of agencies there. They have a separate veterans program.
It's a lot of them here, and it's growing. It's growing rapidly because the guy that called me was NEI about this, and I was like, well, I'm going to learn about it tonight. So
the other alternative, we've seen some agencies, they have a different definition of minority. So minority is ethnic minorities, it's women, it's disadvantaged. So if you're a white male who can show disadvantage, you're a minority. And some of them will also say veterans are minorities.
Right.
They're sort of included in the definition of minority. So that's another approach. Others have just a separate program for veterans.
Right.
But that is a growing, both veterans and service-disabled veterans. Is growing. We've seen that around the country. We have other recommendations about improving data and this and that, but that's sort of the essence of what we're proposing. And that's our presentation.
Thank you.
Well, I can share. I was actually struck this year. I went in on the year-end report from the school board, and some of the things that they were able to accomplish. And I think they had one area where they didn't achieve the goal that they had, but it was amazing how they met a lot of those other areas there just by having that program and just by going through and setting up that office and doing those things. And so, one of the concerns I have is because not only Hampton Roads, but the Commonwealth has a horrible record when it comes to dealing with women and minority-owned businesses. And business people like us, if we find out we're not going to get work here, then we don't come here. We move to other areas. And so when you go do a survey and say, I can't find an Asian or I can't find a black, it's because they're in Atlanta or they're in Charlotte and they're not coming here until they find out that we in this Commonwealth are dead serious about doing this kind of business with everybody. And so it's kind of like a chicken and an egg piece, because we went over with Hampton and I talked with them at great length before we went through this with some of their tripwires and some of the things, because you're right, they just get another study. After 7 years, we got to do another study to make sure that the disparities are still there and whether or not we need to change our focus and all. But so there are folks here, but there aren't a lot of them here to go after a lot of the work that we're looking at. And I guess I don't know if setting a program up will cause someone from Atlanta to want to come to Portsmouth or come to Hampton Roads to set up an office because we're now using this, or, I mean, do you see those kind of experiences?
If there are opportunities, yes. If there are opportunities to come here, the great presentation about the port and all the development that's going on there, not directly related to the city of Portsmouth, but it's the area. So if I'm here, why not chase other opportunities as well?
And we talked, just the mayors with the governor, about trying to get a Hampton Roads disparity study with all of the cities, because even if we do it here, you need a Virginia Beach and a Norfolk, and all of those numbers are just as bad as ours when it comes to doing that. And so I don't know, we're way down the road from that, but
well, we're always here when you need help.
I understand. But I guess I'm more interested in areas that you've done this. Are there a lot of people coming into areas? You know, we've been dubbed as these developers have all of our cities split up. You know, Bob has this one, Jerry's got Norfolk, Ralph has Virginia Beach, and so nobody play in each other's rice bowls, so to speak. That's the whole unwritten language. And how do you get someone to come in to break that up?
Well, go ahead. I was going to say, it really happened to Charlotte as well when development, Charlotte, North Carolina, did not really get hit by the recession as other cities did. And here recently, right before the recession, 2008, 2009 timeframe, we were really building a lot. And there were a lot of firms coming in, setting up shop. All the empty, office space was all being rented, leased out, and people were hiring in the area because not only was there work in the private sector, there was work in the government sector. School bonds, county was building. Excuse me, new hospitals being built. So people come into town, they set up shop there. Now that we slowed down just a little bit for a few years, we're back up in building again. And so all those firms that were there and were able to sustain are still there and now have 2 offices or have 3 offices, different places. So contractors, not necessarily just in construction, but architecture and engineering, they go where the work is.
Right.
That's part of the trade that they're in, is that they go where the work is. So, if you have the opportunities like the port that's coming up, and you have the opportunities of projects that are coming up here, the school bond, the CIP dollars are coming, when you get the word out that you have such a program, people will come. Where they say you build it, they will come. Yes, Bruce?
One of the points that's happening, trends, is that we probably don't bring corporate headquarters in. But our kids that are graduating from college here, entrepreneurs in the area, if they see they have opportunity to build a business here, they'll stay here. And so a lot of in-growth. I've talked to a lot of your businesses, and I've worked with the school system now for almost 3 years. And when we had that vendor fair that your purchasing agent was involved in, what made it interesting for the people, 185 businesses that came, is that they knew $8 million was going to get spent, and they had an opportunity to get a contract with it. And that's what made them all come. And we just did the survey. When asked whether they come back, all 100% of them said they would come back. And I think the biggest issue was there was a gentleman in the room. Skanska was one of the companies that presented. Gentleman was in the room. He started with Skanska with a $20,000 contract. He's still on the job. He's now up to $2 million. He was in the room, and he said, I came on time. I was there. I got the work done. I know what I'm doing. That was the message. It was done right here and covered by television. That's what the opportunity really is.
I think one thing, it's still along in this history, is that one thing that gets lost, I don't like the term disparity study and all that, is that these programs are really about building stakeholders. Because they were initially a conservative program. I mean, it's like Nixon came up with this idea. You know, that's what's forgotten and all this other stuff. And then it kind of switched over and got muddied up. But I do think it has attracted, I mean, particularly coming from Atlanta, it's one of the attractions of Atlanta, because then Maynard Jackson picked it up from Nixon and then built this whole thing and attracted a lot of people to Atlanta. So it is. And you do have to do it a certain way. And it doesn't always work. But it has also created a lot of successful firms, built stakeholders, built a sense of inclusion if it's done properly. It can also be overbearing and can generate friction if it's not done correctly.
So our next steps would be what? I don't know, Dr. Whitaker was on the school board and was aware of that. I don't know, what is our next step now that we have this? Go ahead,
Well,
sir.
that's what I was going to mention, that now that we have a statistical basis for showing that there's been an underutilization of certain groups, now we could move forward if the board chooses to implementing, first of all, drafting a policy, and then implementing that policy strictly based on the findings of the study.
Correct.
Which would give us the legal foundation if we were to be challenged, that we would have a study based, a program based on the findings of a study.
Yeah, you have to base it on some findings from somewhere. If you don't like that, then you need some other findings from something else. But to have a program, you have to adopt some findings that you're basing it on.
And I just want to let the council know also the fact that we're using MGT and use them to do the study. I don't want it to be overlooked that Dr. Egan, who is an attorney, has had cases in the Fourth Circuit that the Fourth Circuit upheld the program. I think that's very significant because if it's challenged, to have someone that has been through that is a plus.
At the district court and appellate court level.
Is that often, though, rare, or folks challenge? I mean, because sooner or later they'll get on board and say, look, we need to get us a team of everybody and just get on with the wedding instead of just, I mean, seriously, I mean, you can spend a whole lot of dollars trying to, and we've already got all the threatening letters when we first talked about doing this study from these groups all over the country about they're coming to get you and all that stuff, but that's a scare tactic. But are there a lot of challenges?
You know, there used to be. And the interesting thing now is there's still some against the DBE program, which I don't really understand because it's usually better crafted than most of the local programs. There are a few challenges, though the DBE program like always wins. You know, I've been an expert witness in those cases, in some of those cases as well. But the MBE cases, there hasn't been really a serious case in a long time. You know, they tend to get settled too. The few times there's a little bit of litigate. It's sort of like the councils and everybody knows how to sort of manage it to not let it get out of control. The AGCs are not, you know, though again it varies by area, they seem to be like, some of it I think, like coming from Atlanta, is like Atlanta, it would be challenged. Atlanta would lose. And then he'd come back and put it right back anyway. You know? So I think to some extent that people said this is just part of public contracting, you know, and so it's better to just sort of be inside the tent and try to make it a workable, flexible, reasonable kind of thing, and that they're not all against participation anyway. They're not all completely against it anyway. You know, they're more concerned about the cost and the flexibility of it.
Good, Dan.
Example, if you could, let's say it's open or set aside for women-owned business or WB or minority. What's the percentage does it normally give them the advantage? The 3%, 5%? No?
Well, there's no set-asides. We don't use that term. No set-asides.
There's sort of three kind of incentives.
Okay.
You know, one is a bid preference, where we say, your bid, we're going to like deduct 3% of it and comparing it to another bid.
If you're
in women or minority. If you're prime, we're going to deduct, say, 3% and comparing your bid to somebody else. That's rare. It exists a few places. That's rare. That's a prime incentive. Another is, as she said, set aside, which is say, For this type of contract, only women and minorities can compete on there. You see some of that in the federal government. That's also rare in state and local government. You do see it for small business. They'll say, we're going to limit competition to small business.
Yeah, but everybody fits in the small business.
Yeah, but everybody does.
45 million in 3 years.
Yeah, and that's a, and that's a problem that the Commonwealth is at. Now, some people have done it for what are called hub zones. Hub zones are firms that are located in distressed neighborhoods. And typically, 2/3 of those are owned by women and minorities. And so you set aside to them, it's race neutral, but it is tilted towards women and minorities. You see that, again, more at the federal level than at state and local level. What is the most common thing is to say is a subcontractor participation goal. If you've got a contract, you need to make good faith efforts to include women and minorities as subcontractors. So that's the most common thing. And then the goal is based on some measure of availability.
That's cost neutral also, correct?
Now that's race conscious because it depends on how you define it. Like if you define minority as including veterans and disadvantaged males, then it is still kind of race neutral.
No, it's a cost neutral. It doesn't cost anybody any difference because you're not giving them the 3%, correct?
It depends on how you define it. Some people say a basis for rejecting a sub is if their bid is in any way higher. Other people say is if the bid is just unreasonably higher.
Right.
So it can be a little bit higher, but it can't be unreasonably higher if you're going to reject a sub. So you see both of those.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Oh.
Yes, ma'am.
But speaking from a data perspective, if you had that sub data, that could be more concrete than anything. And in doing this study, I didn't have it to go by, so we just had to use the private sector data. But one of the recommendations he made was for data management. Yeah. I encourage you to start collecting that subcontractor information, because you could have let contracts to them, but we didn't know because we didn't have it.
We were to set up a contract for something and say we want 20% sub of this subbed out. We can't do that because we didn't have the data, or?
Well, I would suggest, particularly as you start the program, being as flexible as possible. There is evidence supporting it. The private sector evidence. We asked subcontractors. We did look through it. We could not find any evidence that there were subs being used. So we think we've moved the burden of proof over to the other side. If they're going to say, oh, yeah, no, there's a lot of MWBs used as subs, they need to prove, because we've got evidence that they were not. It's not as conclusive as we would like it to be. But again, the most important thing, however you start the program, is that you're flexible, particularly when you start it, but you're flexible in the application, flexible and reasonable.
So should we start it as a prime so we're covered, or should we?
I think probably a mixture of both. But I'm going to get back to the data piece. So we don't collect here the subcontractor. So you had no idea whether a sub was doing something for the city of Portsmouth.
Well, we did have some idea.
For building permits.
Between that, talking to the subs,
right.
And what we could see no evidence of subs being utilized on your MWBE subs.
Set. It wasn't kept. That was not requested data. Once you pay a vendor, they were not requested to submit what subs they used. And so normally when I do this study, I have what subs were paid, ethnicity, what type of service, and the dollar amount. So we do the same thing as I did with the primes that I showed you on a sub level.
So the answer to your question is yes, you can still set subcontracting goals, even though your particular report did not have subcontractor utilization shown because of the
whole data.
Because they won't use it any?
Yeah.
Well, the whole totality of the data we presented. But the thing is, one thing to start doing first is to start having them report the sub data, even as you're working on developing the program. Now, so if you find that, in fact, oh yeah, they're using a lot of MWB subs, then you don't have to worry about it. Because it said, oh, well, that contradicts the evidence we've had so far, because they are using them. So one of the first things to do is to start collecting data.
Gotcha. Yes, sir.
Now that the report has been submitted to council, if it's the consensus of council, as chair of the Minority Business Committee, can I communicate with MGT, make a recommendation as our next step, so that the board can move forward with getting a policy in place? Because this was a board-generated study, right? It wasn't city man. Okay.
No, it was board-generated.
Right. Okay.
But prior to this point, you were precluded from talking to them until they presented this?
Right.
Why, is that a legal piece? Or what kept you from?
We were told we couldn't communicate because it was more or less the city getting that data to them to present to us.
Okay, yeah. No, I would think we want to do that now, right, lawyer? Yeah, right.
Well,
Yeah, okay, absolutely.
I'm sorry, Brandon, I am no longer a Wahoo, I am now a pirate. Both of my sons have attended school, well, one graduated from UVA, and the other one is now at Hampton University. So I will be back in this area a lot more.
But your Wahoo is in the D League, so.
Well, my Wahoo is
He's
getting
earning
ready
money.
to play for the Nets for the summer league.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's leaving the Rockets and going to play for the Nets.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Legal, you got anything? Yeah, you good? All right, thank y'all very much.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, thank you, I will.
We're ready to go into close, or do you have anything else?
No,
Okay,
sir.
all right.
Oh, yeah, the seawall's moved to tomorrow night.
Okay, all right, very
James is
good.
not here tonight.
All right.
I move to go into a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711 for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probably litigation where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body, and consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, and discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, discipline, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body, and evaluation of performance where such evaluation will necessarily involve discussion of the performance of specific individuals.
Second.
Thank you.
Mr. Cherry?
Yes.
Dr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mayor Wright?
Yes.
We are enclosed. Thank you.